This presentation is going to be about Jean Piaget. Piaget is a cognitivist and a constructivist, and there are a couple of things we're going to learn about him, but one of the things that I really want you to know right up front is that it is this guy's work that is the foundation for so much of what we do in public education now. Piaget, as I said, is a cognitivist and a constructivist, and what that means is that he is concerned about how we think and process information, and he's a constructivist, which means that he's concerned with our experiences. He says that we build our understanding from our experiences. Now, the concept of schema is a big one in Piaget's theory, and this is what schema, this is an operational definition, by the way. This is not straight out of a book. This is what it looks like with feet on it in the classroom. I'm sorry, up here. This is operational. A mental construct or a framework for process or conceptual understanding. So, if let's say that we think about a schema for dog. You have a dog schema. When you're a 2-year-old, your dog schema probably includes a wet nose, maybe, paws, 4 paws, a tail, a snout. As you got older and as you became more accustomed to what dogs are and the variety within that schema, you added to that by putting things on like the color, the size, the overall shape of the body, the length of the hair. And now your schema probably has a great deal more than that. As your experiences were more and more and more, your schema grew and grew and grew and became more and more accurate, we hope. We'll talk about that in just a second. But that schema is key because as we're thinking about assessment, we need to remember that assessment in the classroom is going to be of the schema. We're trying to get at what students know or are able to do. Well, look at this definition. This is what they know and this is what they're able to do. So we're trying to assess schema and whether they are correct or incorrect in how they were developed. Piaget says that we actually go through this process that is over here to your right. This whole thing. We go through this because we are either comfortable or uncomfortable with the things that we've been presented with. This is the idea of equilibrium versus disequilibrium. Equilibrium, if we think of this as a state of comfort and we're happy, we're comfortable, everything's fine, and we're not wondering, we're not disagreeing, then we would say that we are at equilibrium and we're pretty much okay with where things are. We don't really need to have more information or a different form of information or whatever. But if we are presented with content that sort of flies in the face of what we already believe, that it challenges our current or extant schema, then we become a bit uneasy. We get into a state of disequilibrium. And what Piaget says is that we use that disequilibrium, the energy that's created from that disequilibrium, to evaluate our processes, our experiences, and to make judgments about how we should reconfigure our understandings. Here's what happens. He says if we have an experience, it will have certain characteristics to it that I'm going to then say, do I have a schema for this already? Do I have an extant schema? Or do I not? So the first answer is a yes or no. Do I have a schema or not? Let's say that I'm looking at a bear and I'm a 2-year-old. If I look at a bear, I'm a 2-year-old, I can look at that bear and I can say, okay, it has a nose, maybe a wet nose. It has the basic shape of a dog. It has 4 paws, and it has the ears, it has a tail, whatever. Yeah, that fits my schema, so dog and bear, same thing. Keep that in your head for a second. If I say, no, I don't, I've never experienced this before, I've never seen this, then I'm going to do this process called accommodation, where I'm going to recognize that even though I have prior knowledge in a variety of different ways, this experience doesn't seem to fit into the whole there. It doesn't seem to fit nicely. Accommodation, think of it like this. If you take a group of kids overnight, let's say you're chaperoning a group of middle school kids overnight someplace, you don't put the boys and the girls in the same rooms. You don't. Why not? Because they are very different, and their differences are compelling. And that compelling difference forces you to give them different accommodations. Just maybe something to help you there. So we accommodate. When we accommodate, we're finding a different place for this. We do it in one of two ways. We either radically modify an extant schema, because probably if this is what we're doing, we've realized we weren't right. We didn't have a good conception in the first place. Or we just create a new one. We say, you know what? This is nothing like anything I know, so I'm going to make a new one. That's accommodation. The other one is assimilation. Assimilation is if I have an experience and I say, do I have a schema that fits this experience? And I say, yeah, I do. Okay, fine. So if there are differences from this experience to this schema that I have, then I'm going to say those differences are not compelling. They're not that big. I'm just going to say, all right, I'm going to go ahead and take those, and they become part of my extant schema. I'm enlarging it, I'm changing it a little bit, I'm adjusting it, but I'm not radically modifying it. So, that is assimilation. Assimilation is the process of recognizing that something is basically the same and just taking in the things that are the same about it, as well as any things that are minor differences. So, if here's the other example. If I say that I have a schema for dog, for instance, and I see a bear, and I'm looking at the bear and it looks the same, then I might say, as a 2-year-old, yeah, that's the same, fine, I'm going to put that in that schema. We as teachers, or parents, or whomever, we recognize that that's not a good decision for them to make. That's a dangerous decision for them to make. We try to point out the differences to them because we want to fix the error of their ways, as it were. We're trying to say, you assimilated, you should have accommodated. Well, when that happens, when we make the wrong decision up here, then we develop a misconception. We develop something that is not accurate. And those are things that teachers need to be aware of. Now, let's go back up to the top real quick here. When we have an experience and we don't feel that we have an extant schema, Piaget would say we want to know. We want to understand. We have that disequilibrium. We want to understand how this whole thing, how it all fits together. That is the disequilibrium. Our process of going through all of this is called equilibration. Piaget says we do these things because we don't want to feel disequilibrium. We want to sort of right the ship. We want to feel calm about everything. So, that's our motivation. Results of good decision making are building, understanding, and good schema. Results of bad decision making are misconceptions and confusion. As you can see, it's just like building any foundation. When you have a foundation that is good, solid, and correct, and accurate, it will support what's to go on top of it. But when you have a foundation that's not those things, then eventually whatever's built on top of it will come crumbling down. That happens to the kids. And those are misconceptions and problems that they have to deal with. The last point about assessment is this. Assessment, so often we think of assessment as being something that we do to learn what they know. You know, can you fill out this test? Can you get this answer right? What we really should be doing in the back of our mind at a basic level is assessment has to consider both the process, that is, this whole process, are they making good decisions, are they making them correctly, and the product, which is the resulting schema that they get from the learning. Now, there's a lot more to Piaget's theory, and this is just an introduction to it. The next few videos will talk about these and how to assess those, how to figure out if a student is in each of these different levels.